Have you ever felt that as you age, some relationships that once seemed essential now just drain your energy? Over 1,000 years ago, a monk named Kobo Daishi Kūkai, one of Japan's greatest Buddhist masters, left behind a warning that remains just as relevant today as it was in the past. He advised that upon reaching a certain age, we must be very careful about the people we choose to keep around us. But what exactly are these dangerous relationships? Why would Kūkai, a man of infinite compassion, recommend that we distance ourselves from certain individuals? Today, we will unravel this profound teaching and understand how we can apply this ancient wisdom to our own lives. Stay with us until the end, as the third type of relationship is the most subtle and perhaps the hardest to recognize. More than 1,000 years ago, during a time when Japan was still a land of uncertain paths and fragmented beliefs, a man was born who would forever change the way we understand life and spirituality. His name was Kūkai, also known as Kobo Daishi, the great master who brought the profound teachings of Shingon Buddhism to Japan. However, his journey was not simple. From a young age, he sensed that the world around him was restless, filled with illusions, and that there was something beyond what the eyes could see. It was this restlessness that led him to seek answers far beyond the borders of his homeland. It is said that even before embarking on his great pilgrimage to China, Kūkai already demonstrated a wisdom that transcended his years. Once, while observing a river, he asked an elder, "If the water never stops flowing, why do we cling to what has already passed?" The old man smiled, but did not respond. The answer, Kūkai would discover many years later, lay in the very impermanence of life. Just as the river flows its course without looking back, we too must learn to flow, to adapt, and to understand the value of each phase of existence. He set off for China as a young man, facing tumultuous seas and unimaginable challenges to reach the great Buddhist masters of the time. It was there that he encountered sacred texts and spiritual practices that would transform him forever. But more than just knowledge, Kūkai learned about time. He realized that youth is marked by the search, the rush, and the need to prove something to the world. But true wisdom only arrives when we stop running and begin to listen. When we understand that life is not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we comprehend. When he returned to Japan, he was no longer the same man. In his eyes, there was serenity, but also a deep discernment. He understood that life is divided into cycles and that at a certain age, we should choose with greater care what we carry with us. He would say, "The traveler who wishes to go far must lighten his baggage." But what would this baggage be? Was it material possessions? Or perhaps something much more subtle? Something we carry in our hearts and minds? At 50, we enter a new stage in our journey. We are no longer driven by the same ambitions of youth. What we seek now is no longer quantity, but quality. It is no longer speed, but depth. And above all, we no longer want relationships that weigh us down, but rather those that bring us lightness. Kūkai understood this throughout his years of meditation and teaching. He recognized that there are relationships that nourish us and those that drain us. There are people who illuminate our path and others who merely cast shadows upon it. That is why he left a warning. There will come a time in life when we must choose wisely who remains by our side and whom we must let go. For maintaining connections that no longer make sense is not an act of kindness, but of self-imprisonment. Like a traveler who insists on carrying stones in his backpack, those who do not choose their companions wisely often tire before even reaching their destination, and that is exactly why he warned us about 3 types of relationships we should avoid after the age of 50. 3 connections that, if not severed, can prevent us from living this phase of life with peace and fulfillment. But what might these relationships be? The first one may be closer than we think. Have you ever felt that after a conversation with someone, you felt exhausted, as if you had just run a marathon without moving an inch? As if all your energy had been drained with nothing positive left in return? This is the first type of relationship that Kūkai warns us to avoid. Those that suck your vitality without ever reciprocating. The most dangerous part is that often these relationships disguise themselves as friendship, companionship, or even family obligations. But deep down, they are like a bottomless pit. No matter how much you try to fill it, it is never enough. These people always show up when they need something. They come close in search of a favor, attention, or simply an ear willing to listen to their complaints. But notice this: when you are the one in need, they vanish. They don't ask how you are, they don't offer a shoulder when life weighs you down, and they show no genuine interest in your well-being. To them, you're like a candle lit in the dark, something that can be consumed to illuminate their own paths without any concern that, little by little, that flame is burning out. Kūkai used to say that these people are like broken cups. No matter how hard you try to fill them, they never feel satisfied. You can offer advice, support, time, and energy, but none of it will be enough because there is no reciprocity. They don't want to improve. They don't want to find solutions. They simply want to pour onto you the weight that they refuse to carry themselves. And the more you try to help, the deeper you get caught in this exhausting cycle, until one day you realize you no longer have the strength even for yourself. But here's the great truth: it is not selfish to distance yourself from those who harm you. On the contrary, learning to protect yourself from these relationships is an act of self-love. At 50, we no longer have time to waste on what drains us and does not nourish us. We already carry our own battles, our pains, and our joys. This is the moment to surround ourselves with relationships that bring us lightness, that make us smile, that offer mutual support. Kūkai teaches us that the energy we cultivate in our hearts determines the quality of our lives, and that includes the people we choose to have by our side. If you feel that a relationship causes you more exhaustion than happiness, it might be time to reflect: why am I still allowing this? Often, we cling to these relationships out of fear of loneliness, guilt, or a sense of obligation. But it's essential to remember that every minute we spend with someone who drains us is one less minute we could devote to something that genuinely brings us joy. What Kūkai teaches us is that not all connections are meant to last a lifetime, and it's perfectly okay to let go of what no longer makes sense. This doesn't mean acting with resentment or abruptly severing ties. Distancing can be silent, gradual, and above all, done with compassion. But it needs to be done. We cannot allow ourselves to be prisoners of relationships that merely drain us. In the end, life isn't measured by how much we give to others, but by how much we are able to live in balance. Now, take a moment to think. Is there someone in your life who always seeks you out when they need something, but is never present when the situation is reversed? A relationship that leaves you feeling tired, drained, and lacking motivation? If so, perhaps it's time to reconsider this connection, because Kūkai warns us, our time is our most precious asset, and wasting it on those who do not value our presence is one of the most subtle forms of suffering. And there is another type of relationship even more treacherous that we should avoid. There exists a type of relationship that at first glance may seem harmless, but over time becomes an invisible weight. These are the people who refuse to accept your evolution. They cannot stand to see you grow, change, and mature. For them, you should be exactly as you were years ago, the same person, with the same habits, the same thoughts, the same limitations. But life does not work that way. No one crosses 5 decades of existence without changing. And if someone insists on treating you as if you are stuck in the past, that person does not respect your journey. You might have heard phrases like, "Oh, you weren't like this before," or "Since when did you get so serious?" or even, "Now do you think you're better than others?" These words, said in jest or provocation, carry a deeper meaning: the inability of these people to accept that you are no longer the same. But is the problem really with you? Or is the change that bothers them actually a reflection of their own stagnation? Kūkai teaches us that growing is like climbing a mountain. In the beginning, we walk alongside many people, but as we progress, the path narrows. Some choose to stay behind. Others even try to continue, but are not prepared for the altitude. If we insist on carrying those who do not want to climb, we become exhausted, lacking the strength to follow our own journey. And then comes a choice. Do we give up our growth to please others, Or do we move forward, even if it means leaving some people behind? What many people don't understand is that changing is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of courage. It requires effort, reflection, and often pain. At 50, we no longer want to waste time on superficialities. We seek peace, depth, and meaning. Those who do not respect this quest will try by all means to pull you back to a place where you no longer belong. They will laugh at your new way of thinking, downplay your achievements, trying to convince you that your transformation has no value. But the truth is that not everyone who started the journey with you will be by your side at the end. And that is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with choosing different paths. The problem lies in insisting on keeping close those who no longer keep pace with you, those who disregard your changes, those who belittle your growth. These relationships not only weigh us down, they rob us of the freedom to be who we truly are. If you feel like you need to justify yourself all the time, that you have to hide your new version in order to be accepted, that your achievements are not celebrated by those who should be by your side, it might be time to ask yourself, why am I still allowing this? Kūkai teaches us that true peace is only possible when we surround ourselves with people who respect our essence, who encourage us to move forward, who accept us for who we are today, not for who we were yesterday. So, look around you. Are there people in your life who try to bind you to the past? Who do not respect your journey? If so, perhaps it is time to break free. Because there is something even more dangerous than those who drain us, or those who try to tether us to the past. There exists a relationship that confines us silently, and often we don't even realize it. So far, we have talked about people who drain your energy, about those who do not respect your journey and try to keep you tied to the past. But there is an even more dangerous type of relationship, more silent and much more challenging to perceive. It does not come from outside. It comes from within. It is the relationship you have with yourself. Because in the end, it does not matter how many negative people are around you. If there is peace within you, none of that will have power over your life. But if your mind is your enemy, then it does not matter where you go. Suffering will always accompany you. How many times have you found yourself ruminating over the past, reliving mistakes, carrying regrets as if they were invisible chains? How many sleepless nights have you spent blaming yourself for what you should or could have done differently? The mind is a mirror of the soul, and if we do not learn to clean that mirror, everything we see will be distorted. Kūkai teaches us that pain does not come from the past, it comes from our attachment to it. The past is gone, yet we insist on keeping it alive within us, reliving hurts, resentments, and sorrows that no longer belong to the present. And the worst part is that this internal voice that torments us is often harsher than any external criticism. If someone criticizes us, we can distance ourselves. If someone treats us poorly, we can choose not to listen anymore. But what do we do when the judgment comes from within? What happens when we become prisoners of our own thoughts? Kūkai said, "An unsettled mind is like a tumultuous sea. No vessel reaches its destination without first learning to calm the waters." If we want peace, we must learn to silence that internal voice that keeps us from moving forward. But here's the big question. Many people fear silence. Have you noticed how we are always trying to distract ourselves? We turn on the TV, scroll through our phones, seek out meaningless conversations, anything to avoid being alone with our own thoughts. Because when the world around us quiets down, the only voice left is our own. And for many, this voice isn't a friend, it's a harsh judge, always ready to remind us of our mistakes, flaws, and unresolved pains. The real danger lies not in others, but in what we choose to nurture within ourselves. At 50, there's no more time to waste on internal wars. Life passes too quickly to get stuck in cycles of self-sabotage. If there's something that needs forgiving, forgive it. If there's something that needs to be left behind, let it go. Don't carry an invisible enemy within you. Kūkai teaches us that the secret to true peace lies not in changing the past, but in changing how we look at it. What's done is done. What matters is what we make of the time that remains. So ask yourself, if your mind were a house, would it be a place of rest or a place of torment? If the answer is torment, then maybe it's time to do some internal spring cleaning, to clean that mirror of the soul and learn to look at yourself with more compassion. Because until we learn to treat ourselves kindly, no external change will be sufficient. And now comes the most important question of all. How do we find this inner peace? How do we learn to let go of what weighs us down and live more lightly? Kūkai left us a path, a simple yet powerful method. And if you've made it this far, you're ready to take the first step. If the mind is the source of our unrest, then how do we silence it? How can we find peace in a world that never stops, where worries seem endless and where the past and future pull us in every direction? Kūkai teaches us that true peace doesn't come from controlling everything around us, but from learning to control what's inside us. We cannot stop the wind from blowing, but we can learn not to be swept away by it. And for that, there are 3 essential steps. The first step is to recognize. Often, we live on autopilot, unaware of the weight we're carrying. We become accustomed to anxiety, guilt, and harsh self-criticism as if they are natural parts of life. But pause for a moment and observe what inside you still hurts. What thought comes back whenever you are alone? Which stories from the past still echo in your mind? Before changing anything, we need to see what is holding us back. The second step is to accept. Acceptance doesn't mean agreeing with everything that has happened, but rather ceasing to resist what cannot be changed. Suffering arises when we wish the past had been different, when we fight against something that is already written. But the past is like a tree that is already grown. There's no point in wishing it were something else. All we can do is learn to coexist with its shadow or find a new path in its light. Kūkai said, "What is past no longer belongs to you. What belongs to you is only this moment." And then comes the third step, redirecting. After recognizing and accepting, the most important moment arrives, deciding where we want to take our lives from here on. What thoughts do we want to nurture? Which relationships do we want to maintain? Where do we wish to invest our time and energy? At 50, each minute becomes too precious to waste on resentments, regrets, or people who do not do us good. If we seek peace, we need to learn to choose wisely what we allow into our minds and hearts. And here's a secret that Kūkai taught us. Peace is not something you seek. It's something you cultivate. Just as a garden doesn't bloom overnight, our minds also need daily care. Small habits, like moments of silence, conscious breathing, and gratitude, can completely transform the way we live. But none of this works if we continue surrounding ourselves with the same people and thoughts that harm us. It takes courage to change, to let go, to move forward. So stop for a moment and reflect. What within you needs to be released? What weight have you been carrying for years that no longer makes sense? The answer may not come immediately, but simply asking the question begins to open up space for transformation. Remember, what you hold on to holds on to you. What you let go frees you. But what if doubts arise? What if the fear of change feels too great? Kūkai also left us a teaching for that, because the end of a cycle always brings uncertainty, and we often find ourselves asking, am I on the right path? For this, there's a final teaching, a last lesson that can transform the way we face life going forward. Shortly before leaving this world, Kūkai gathered his disciples to share his last teaching. He knew that even after years of learning, even after understanding the importance of letting go of what weighs us down, many still carry doubts and fears. Because deep down, change is scary. Leaving people behind, letting go of old habits, accepting that the past cannot be rewritten, this all requires courage. And in those moments, it's natural to ask, am I on the right path? The disciples were silent, waiting for his words, and then Kūkai said, "The sky does not hold the clouds. The river does not cling to the waves. A free mind does not cling to the past." What did he mean by this? That everything in life flows, and nothing should be held on too tightly. just as the sky allows the clouds to pass, we too must learn to let go of what has fulfilled its purpose. Just as the river follows its course without trying to hold the waves that arise within it, we need to allow life to flow naturally without clinging to what no longer belongs to us. One of the disciples asked, "But Master, what if I let something go and later regret it?" Kūkai smiled and replied, "The wind that carried away yesterday's leaves will bring tomorrow's flowers." In other words, the space we create by letting something go is the same space where something new can blossom. The fear of losing prevents us from seeing what we can gain. Often, we cling to what harms us out of sheer habit, unaware that by releasing it, we open the way for new opportunities, new encounters, and a new peace we've never experienced before. Another disciple asked, "What if I don't know what to let go?" Kūkai responded, "If something weighs you down, it doesn't belong to you, because what is truly ours doesn't require effort to maintain. Healthy relationships flow naturally. Healthy thoughts bring lightness. Paths that do us good do not need to be forced. If something causes distress and fatigue, stealing more energy than it gives, it may be time to question whether it still deserves a part in our lives." But Kūkai wasn't just talking about letting go of external things, people, situations, habits. The deeper teaching was about releasing oneself, letting go of past guilt, letting go of the need to control everything, letting go of the idea that we must be perfect, that we must please everyone, that we must carry more than we can bear. He teaches us that true freedom does not come from the outside world, but from how we learn to relate to ourselves. So, if there's one last teaching we can take from Kūkai, it is this: life is like a flame. It dances, it shines, it warms, but it never remains still. Nothing should be held onto tightly, nothing should be maintained out of obligation. At 50, there's no more time to carry unnecessary burdens. What doesn't bring peace needs to be let go. What doesn't add value should be left behind. And now, I ask you, what in your life is still being held on to forcefully? What, if released today, would create space for something better? The answer is already within you. But there's one last step, the conclusion of all this, because understanding these teachings is just the beginning. The real challenge is to apply them, and that's what we're going to discuss now. Life is made up of cycles. Some close naturally, while others we insist on keeping open even when they no longer make sense. But there comes a moment when we need to make a decision. Do we continue to carry unnecessary weights, or do we choose to move forward more lightly? Kūkai showed us that often what keeps us in suffering is not the events themselves, but our resistance to letting them go. The fundamental question is not whether we should let go, but why we are still holding on. Time is a precious commodity, perhaps the most precious we have. At 50, there is no longer time for long regrets, for empty relationships, or for paralyzing thoughts. The past cannot be changed, but what we do with what remains is entirely in our hands. And this is the greatest lesson Kūkai left us. No one can walk this path for you. The choice will always be yours. Perhaps throughout this message, you have thought of people, situations, or feelings that you still carry. Maybe you've realized that certain relationships no longer do you any good, that certain thoughts continue to weigh on you even after so many years. If this is the case, know that this is already a sign that something within you is ready to change. But change only happens when we decide to allow it to take place. It isn't easy. Letting go is never easy. The heart clings, the mind creates excuses, and the fear of emptiness paralyzes us. But what weighs more, the fear of letting go or the suffering of continuing to carry it? Often, we cling to something for so long that we forget what it feels like to live without that burden. But the moment to let go does not come when there is no longer fear. It comes when you realize that your peace is worth more than any fear. So I ask, what still binds you? What, if released today, would allow your life to flow more lightly? Maybe it's a relationship that no longer makes sense. Maybe it's words that have been held back for years. Maybe it's guilt, self-imposed pressure, or resentment. Whatever it is, ask yourself, is it worth carrying this forward, or is it time to set myself free? If this message resonated with your heart, please share in the comments what spoke to you the most. Which part of this teaching made sense to your life? And if this message brought important reflections, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we always bring messages to help you find more peace and purpose along the way. Remember, life doesn't wait. Time flows on just like the river. And the only question that remains is, will you continue to hold on, or will you finally let go?